Imagine a nation where the commitment to protecting its environment isn't just, a vague promise, but a really detailed legal blueprint woven right into how the country is run. Well, that future isn't some distant idea. It's actually happening right now in South Africa. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into South Africa's groundbreaking new law, the Climate Change Act 2024. This is pretty significant legislation. It was officially signed into law by the president back in July 2024 and became active just days later. So our mission here is to sort of cut through the complexity of this act. It's quite multifaceted. We're going to try and pull out the most important bits of knowledge, the key insights really, give you a shortcut to understanding its core aims, the systems it sets up, and importantly, what it implies for you, whether you're a citizen, maybe a business leader, or just someone interested in how nations are tackling the climate crisis. We really want to move beyond just the headlines here, get into the maybe surprising facts and the crucial details of this pretty monumental legal shift. So let's unpack this. Why this specific act and why now for South Africa? What's the story behind this kind of, bold climate action?
Yeah, it's interesting. What's truly fascinating, I think, is how fundamentally the act is rooted right in the country's constitution. It upholds that basic human right, to an environment that isn't harmful to your health or well-being. And it emphasizes protecting that for people now and for future generations. But it goes further. The act uses incredibly direct language. It calls human-caused climate change, anthropogenic climate change, an urgent threat to human societies and the planet.
Wow, urgent threat. That's strong language for legislation.
It really is.
Right.
It almost reads like a legal declaration of emergency, demanding an effective, progressive, and incremental response. That sets a very serious tone right from the start.
Okay. I like that it starts from such a fundamental place, rights and this direct declaration of urgency. But South Africa faces a kind of unique challenge with climate change, doesn't it? It's not just about its global role, but also its own vulnerabilities at home.
Exactly. Yeah, imagine the tightrope walk for policymakers there. On one side, the Act acknowledges South Africa's vital role in the global effort to cut greenhouse gas emissions. It identifies them as the primary drivers of human-induced climate change. So that's their contribution to international commitments, like the Paris Agreement. But then on the other side, the Act starkly highlights that South Africa is especially vulnerable to climate impacts right at home.
Right.
We're talking more frequent, more intense, extreme weather events, and that affects everything. Human health, access to food and water, biodiversity, even where people live. The Act explicitly states these impacts could actually undermine achieving the Republic's developmental goals. It links climate directly to national progress, or lack thereof.
That's a really powerful connection. So it's not just framed as an environmental issue, but one that threatens the country's development itself. And sort of at the heart of all this, I keep seeing this phrase, a just transition. That's not just jargon, is it? What does the act actually mean by that?
No, it's absolutely central. It's a defining theme, and the Act gives a very concrete definition. It aims for a long-term just transition to a low-carbon and climate-resilient economy and society. And the just part is critical. It's defined as a shift that helps create decent work for all, social inclusion, and the eradication of poverty.
Okay.
So it's not just about cutting emissions. It's about doing it in a way that builds a fairer society, making sure the benefits are shared widely, and crucially, that no one gets left behind in the shift.
So greening the economy, but in a way that actively tackles existing problems like unemployment and inequality. That's a huge ambition.
It truly is. The vision is to attain significant socioeconomic and environmental benefits through a transition that's nationally driven, but also empowering and participatory.
Yeah.
And crucially, the Act recognizes that climate impacts, they transcend traditionally sectoral governance approaches. Meaning climate change isn't a problem one government department can fix alone, right?
Right.
It demands a united, coordinated, cooperative, legal and administrative response across all levels of government, national, provincial, and municipal.
Okay, that gives us the critical why behind this act, and it's pretty ambitious vision. The next logical question then is, how? How exactly does South Africa plan to turn these principles into actual action? What are the structures, the strategies?
Well, the Act lays out some clear guiding principles for how it should be interpreted and applied. It emphasizes protecting the climate system for people now and in the future. It acknowledges international equity and each country's common but differentiated responsibilities.
Which means basically different countries have different roles and capacities.
Exactly. Different historical contributions to emissions, different abilities to respond. The Act also strongly mandates that all responses must be based on the best available science, evidence, and information.
Got it. And I noticed the polluter pays principle seems quite prominent too. That feels significant for accountability.
It is. It's stated directly in the Act. Those responsible for causing harmful impacts must bear the costs of dealing with them. And a key institutional piece here is the Presidential Climate Commission, the PCC. Now, it existed before, but this act really formalizes and solidifies it as an independent, impartial national public entity. It has full legal capacity now.
Okay, so it's not just some internal advisory group, but an independent body recognized in law. That seems to add quite a bit of weight. How's it set up?
So the president points up to 25 commissioners. They're chosen to reflect a really fair representation of diverse stakeholders. You've got government, organized labor, civil society, traditional leaders, local government associations,
For a
business.
real
A
mix.
real mix, yeah. And the president chairs it. Its core job is to advise on the republic's climate change response.
Yeah.
That covers everything from mitigation, adaptation, to all the socioeconomic stuff related to that just transition.
And transparency. Are their findings made public? Can people see what they're recommending?
Absolutely. The PCC's reports, studies, recommendations, you have to be submitted to the National Assembly and the relevant ministers within 30 days. And importantly, they're publicly available on the PCC's website. So there's a high level of accountability and public access built in.
Right, that's good. Now, here's where it gets really interesting for me. It's not just top down. The act also seems to push climate action down to lower levels by using existing structures. How does it empower provinces and municipalities?
Yeah, it's quite a clever move, actually. Existing premiers' intergovernmental forums, they're now officially designated as provincial forums on climate change. And the district intergovernmental forums become municipal forums on climate change.
Ah, okay.
So these existing forums are explicitly tasked with coordinating climate change actions within their own provinces and municipalities. It really shows the Act's comprehensive reach, making sure action happens across all spheres of government.
And there's a reporting line.
Yes, there's a clear chain. Provincial forums report up to the President's Coordinating Council, and municipal forums report to their provincial forums. Ensures accountability flows upwards.
So it's really about embedding climate action into the normal machinery of government, making it just part of how things are done, which leads, I guess, to integrated policy alignment across the board.
Precisely. The Act mandates that every organ of state, basically any public body, must review and revise their policies, laws, programs, decisions to align with the climate change response. This Act legally binds all of them, and it applies broadly across the whole republic, even its internal waters, territorial waters, the exclusive economic zone, the continental shelf, and the Prince Edward Islands.
Wow, comprehensive.
Very. And it's designed to be read alongside existing environmental laws, like the National Environmental Management Act. But if there's any conflict with other specific climate change laws, this act takes precedence. It's the main framework.
Okay, that sounds like an incredibly thorough approach to governance, really embedding climate action. All right, we've talked about the why and the how. Let's dive into the what. What specific actions, what mechanisms does this act actually put in place to tackle emissions and build resilience?
Right. So the act outlines two main pillars, really. Adaptation to climate impacts and mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions. For adaptation, the minister has to, within 1 year of the act starting, determine national adaptation objectives and indicators. They also have to develop adaptation scenarios, basically, anticipating future climate impacts and vulnerabilities over the short, medium, and long term.
Looking ahead.
Exactly. And this is all based on the best available science, evidence, and information. It includes things like climate monitoring and early warning systems. Critical stuff.
Okay, so setting the targets, understanding the risks proactively. What about the actual plan for adapting?
Well, a comprehensive national adaptation strategy and plan has to be developed and published within 2 years. Its purpose is very clear. Achieve a reduction in the vulnerability of society, the economy, and the environment. Strengthen resilience and enhance adaptive capacity. And the plan is designed as an integrated and coordinated approach. It has to involve all levels of government, NGOs, the private sector, local communities, everyone.
And does it also cascade down to specific sectors like farming or tourism?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Ministers responsible for specific functions listed in Schedule 2, and that schedule covers areas like agriculture, education, energy, health, tourism, quite a few key sectors. They must develop and implement their own sector adaptation strategy and plan. And these have to be informed by vulnerability assessments specific to their sectors. So targeted, relevant responses.
That sounds like a robust framework for adaptation. Now let's shift to the other big pillar, mitigation, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. How does the Act aim to achieve that? That's often the trickiest part.
It is. It starts with a national emissions trajectory. The minister, after consulting with cabinet, has to determine a quantitative target for total GHG emissions over a set period. Until that's published, South Africa's latest NDCC, their nationally determined contribution under the Paris Agreement, serves as the trajectory.
So that's the national cap
And that's
assessment.
the national cap, and it gets reviewed every 5 years.
Okay, a clear, measurable goal for the whole country. How does that then translate down to, say, individual industries or companies?
That's where sectoral emissions targets come in. The Act requires the minister to identify and list specific GHG-emitting sectors and subsectors. Think energy, industry, transport. For these, specific sectoral emission targets will be set, both quantitative like numbers and qualitative. And these have to align with the national trajectory. These targets include specific reduction goals for rolling periods. 5 years, 5 to 10 years, and 10 to 15 years out. And when setting these, the minister has to consider socioeconomic impacts, the best available science, and review them every 5 years. They'll look at things like new technology, international commitments, the strategic importance of sectors for jobs and growth, always within that just transition framework.
That sounds like a very detailed, targeted approach at the industry level.
Yeah.
And it's not just about targets, but specific gases and activities too, right? I saw a mention of that.
Correct. The minister is required to publish lists of specific greenhouse gases known to cause or worsen climate change, along with the activities that emit them. This applies to both existing activities and any new ones that start up. And for these listed activities, the minister sets quantitative emission thresholds. These are expressed in CO2 equivalent, or CO2e.
Which is just a standard way to compare different greenhouse gases.
Exactly, compares their warming impact relative to carbon dioxide.
Okay, now this next part seems like where the rubber really meets the road for businesses and other entities. Carbon budgets. This sounds like a very direct, very powerful mechanism.
It absolutely is. It's probably one of the most talked about parts of the Act. The minister is mandated to allocate a carbon budget to any person, which means an entity or a company conducting one of those listed high-emission activities.
So like a pollution allowance.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
A company's legal allowance, its cap, for its direct greenhouse gas emissions over a defined period. And these budgets will be set for at least 3 successive 5-year periods. The maximum amount allowed is specified for the first 5 years, so it provides some long-term certainty or at least a planning horizon.
Okay, an actual legally binding cap on emissions for specific major players. What happens once a company gets allocated one of these carbon budgets? What are they required to do?
Right, so any entity allocated a carbon budget must prepare and submit a greenhouse gas mitigation plan. This plan needs ministerial approval. It has to outline precisely how they intend to stay within their allocated budget. Then they have to actually implement that plan, monitor it annually, report their progress, and detail any corrective measures if they look like they might exceed their budget. The minister reviews these budgets at the end of each 5-year period, or if requested, considering things like socioeconomic impacts and available technology options.
That's a pretty robust system. Continuous oversight, mandatory planning. What about synthetic greenhouse gases? Things like HFCs, are they covered?
Yes, they are specifically addressed. The Act mandates the minister to declare certain artificial GHGs as synthetic greenhouse gases. And they have to specify if these gases are to be phased down or completely phased out, setting clear timeframes and thresholds. Plans for this phase down or phase out must be developed, and they even need to address how importers and exporters account for the emissions associated with these substances.
Okay, comprehensive. And how will they keep track of all this? All these emissions across the nation from different sectors, different companies.
That's the job of the National Greenhouse Gas Inventory. The minister must establish a national system for data collection to create this comprehensive inventory. And there needs to be an annual report based on this inventory. This report will analyze emission trends, compare actual emissions against that national trajectory we talked about, and against international commitments.
So a crucial transparency tool.
Exactly. It's a vital transparency and accountability tool, allowing everyone, government, public, international partners, to see the actual progress being made or not being made.
Okay, so we've got the grand vision, the multi-level structures, the detailed plans for both adaptation and mitigation, including those carbon budgets. What about the nuts and bolts? Enforcement, public engagement. What happens if someone doesn't comply with all this? Are there teeth?
There are definitely teeth. The Act grants the minister broad powers to make regulations on various critical aspects, things like international commitments, managing the response through incentives or disincentives to change behavior, monitoring national progress effectively, and crucially, yes, it includes significant penalties for noncompliance.
Okay, what kind of penalties are we talking about here? How serious are they?
They're quite serious.
Hmm.
For specific offenses like failing to provide required information, giving false data, failing to submit that mandatory greenhouse gas mitigation plan if you have a carbon budget, or not complying with directives on synthetic GHGs. For a first conviction, a person can face a fine not exceeding R5 million, that's South African rand, or imprisonment for up to 5 years, or both.
5 million rand. Okay.
And for a second or subsequent conviction, the penalties can double. A fine not exceeding R10 million, or imprisonment for up to 10 years, or potentially both.
Wow. Okay, so those are indeed serious penalties. It sends a clear message that compliance isn't optional.
Yeah, it certainly does. And there's another layer of oversight. Regulations related to the finance mechanism, how things are funded, must be tabled in Parliament before they are published. Adds another check.
Right. What about public input then? We talked about the just transition being participatory. Is there a mechanism for citizens, for stakeholders to actually engage with this process beyond just facing penalties if they get it wrong?
Absolutely. The Act puts a strong emphasis on broad public participation and consultation. It's not just lip service. Before exercising many key functions or powers like setting targets or approving plans, the minister or the provincial MEC or the local mayor must provide public notice. This notice goes in the government gazette and at least one nationally distributed newspaper or a local one if the impact is just regional.
And what does the notice do?
It invites written comments or objections from the public, usually within 30 days, and it has to provide enough information so people can actually engage meaningfully. The Act even allows for oral representations, like public hearings, in appropriate situations. And importantly, all these comments and objections must be given due consideration.
So the public voice has to be listened to.
That's the requirement. It's designed to ensure public voices are genuinely heard and considered in the decision-making.
That sounds like a pretty thorough and inclusive process for public input, really building on that idea of a participatory transition you mentioned earlier.
It is. And on top of that, the Act mandates extensive consultation within government itself. Ministers have to consult affected cabinet colleagues and provincial MPs. MECs have to consult others in their provincial executive and relevant national bodies. It really tries to foster that cooperative governance approach across all spheres, ensuring everyone's aligned, or at least talking to each other.
We've really navigated quite an intricate landscape here with South Africa's Climate Change Act 2024, from its constitutional roots and that clear statement about the urgent threat of climate change, all the way through to the detailed mechanisms for cutting emissions, adapting to impacts, and all guided, hopefully, by that principle of a just transition. It really lays out a comprehensive national blueprint for climate action, doesn't it, across all levels of government?
It's incredibly ambitious, no doubt about it, and very detailed piece of legislation. It sets out clear responsibilities, clear mechanisms cutting across so many different sectors and levels of government. It's quite something on paper.
It really is. And this act, it sets such a rigorous framework. It seems quite unique in its detailed application of things like carbon budgets and this multi-sphere governance approach, which raises, I think, an important final thought for you, our listener, to consider. Given such a robust legal foundation, how might South Africa's actual journey in implementing this act, particularly in ensuring it delivers a truly just transition for all its citizens? How might that journey serve as a vital case study, maybe even a model or perhaps a cautionary tale for other developing nations grappling with similar complex climate challenges? Something to think about.